the stars, Bob Barker, Brett Summers, Charles Nelson Riley, Arlene Francis, Richard Dawson, and Fannie Flagg as we play the star-studded Big Money Match Game 75. And now here's the star of Match Game 75, Gene Rayburn.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hello, Johnny Olson and friends. You got a good group here today, John?
Yeah.
Good. We got a good group up here. Nice to see all of your beautiful faces.
Match Game is without a doubt one of Mark Goodson's greatest game show creations. The original running from 1962 to 1969, and the revival did even better, lasting from 1973 to 1982, and was even the #1 daytime game show for 3 years. There was also a concurrent nighttime version that ran 6 years. Everything about it was just perfect. It was a fun game you could play along with at home. Gene Rayburn was an excellent host, and the panel would often get so out of control that there's been debates on whether or not they had a few in between shows. And Gene just thrived on it. It was complete chaos, and it made for great TV. Because it did so well, there have been numerous attempts to revive the format, and none of them have found the same success. I guess none of them just had that spontaneity that era had. The 1983 Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour was plagued by an inferior version of Hollywood Squares, with a hosting miscast in John Bauman. And unfortunately, it just dragged that version of Match Game, which was okay, right down to the crapper with it. There was supposed to be another revival in the mid-'80s, but ABC backed out when they found out how old Gene Rayburn was and decided he was too old to do it. The 1990 revival was plagued with a challenging noon time slot, as well as a late host change, as originally intended host Bert Convey's health had deteriorated, and he couldn't commit to a series. Thus, producers were forced to turn to a little-known Ross Schaefer. And let's just pretend the 1996 pilot with Charlene Tilton never happened. I do not recommend looking it up. Seriously, don't. The 1998 version with Michael Berger was plopped into a late night time slot, where the dirty humor was just totally forced and slapped you in the face. And besides that, the budget was just way too low for it. And it was a complete flop. There were a host of other attempts after that, and then in 2016, we finally got a true revival on ABC with Alec Baldwin as host, where it got a respectable 5-year run. And that's just a very brief history. I could go on for hours about Match Game, but I just don't have the energy, frankly. Now, Match Game did find its way into several foreign markets as well, and that's why we're going to talk about it today, because it did get into Canada, where there was both an English and a French-speaking version. So let's look at Match Game in Canada, beginning with the French version, Atom Crocus.
Ce soir à l'émission, David Bird, Jean-François Barry, Stéphane Fallu, Marie Paiement, Sylvie Boucher et Alex Perron. Et maintenant, votre animateur, Alexandre Barrette. Public, encore une fois, exceptionnel en studio. Merci beaucoup d'être là, tout le monde. Merci.
Atom Crocus was the Quebecois version of Match Game. in Canada. It was taped in Montreal and ran on the VE network, where it was hosted by comedian and TV personality Alexandre Barrette. The show debuted in 2010 and would run until 2016, canceled just before the Alec Baldwin revival launched in the US. Now, the name Atom Crocus directly translates as linked atoms and comes from a French expression meaning two people who have a lot in common. They say they have linked atoms. It's kind of a weird name, but I see where they're going with it. And Alexandre, he does a nice job. He's no Gene Rayburn, but clearly no one can ever replace him. And he doesn't do anything too badly. He keeps the game moving. He has some fun. So I'll give him a pass. Much like the 70s version of Match Game, two contestants play with 6 celebrities. Alexandre reads questions with a blank in it and could have several possible answers. The celebrities write their answers. After this, the contestant gives their answer, and Alexandre canvasses the celebrities for their answers. Each match worth 25 points. Round 2, same process, but each match is worth 50 points. And the game concludes with round 3 called Sur la même longueur d'onde, or translated, on the same wavelength. Basically, it's the matchup game from the 90s version. Beginning with the players trailing, each player chooses a celebrity. They're given 45 seconds. The contestant is shown a phrase with a blank in it and secretly chooses one of 2 options. The options are then read for the celebrity, who chooses one verbally. If they match, then the contestant scores 50 points. Once each contestant's played the round, whoever has the highest score wins the game, converts their points to dollars, and earns the right to play the bonus game. In the first portion of the bonus game, the contestant attempts to predict via a poll what was the most popular answer to a short statement. They can call in up to 3 celebrities for advice, and may use one of their answers or come up with one of their own. If the contestant matches the number 1 answer, according to the poll, then they earn a pot of $2,000 to shoot for. If they match the second most popular answer, they'll play for $1,500, and if they match the third, they'll play for $1,000. If a contestant strikes out, they'll play for $500. The next portion is the head-to-head match, but first the contestant spins a wheel to determine which of the celebrities they'll play with. And if the wheel lands on one of the red spots, then the pot is doubled. From here, one question is read, the celebrity writes their answer, and the contestant tries to match. If they match, the contestant wins the money. So realistically, the highest possible win here is maybe about $4,500, which is a little bit cheap for that time, especially since it's very top-heavy. Since contestants who don't match on the head-to-head match typically don't win that much, maybe a couple $100 at most. And it feels especially cheap that they couldn't kick in another $200 or whatever for the audience match. But the game's strong enough that I guess they got away with a low budget, and they got a good 6-year run. And even did well enough to inspire a version for Anglophones.
Get ready to make a match. It's Match Game. Meet today's panel. Yvette Nicole Brown, Deborah DiGiovanni, Colin Mockery, Rab Chittenden, Laura Silovitz, and Sean Cullen. It's the game where we fill in the blanks with cash. It's Match Game.
Welcome to Match Game. I'm your host, Darren Rose. This is the show where we take things into our own hands, even when our hands are full. Dave, you're a handful.
The English-speaking version of Match Game in Canada would launch in 2012 on the Comedy Network, where it ran for 2 seasons. So once again, Comedy Central fails to break the Win Ben Stein's money curse and is unable to get a show past the 2nd season. The 1st season was taped on the set of At Home Crocus in Montreal, while the 2nd season was taped in Toronto on a new set. The host of the show is comedian Darren Rose. Darren was a little bit stiff at times, but did gradually loosen up a little. And he doesn't do anything horrible, but if you're going to do this type of a show, you need to be really, really loose. So he may have been a little bit of a miscast. Joining him as regular panelists are comedian Deborah DiGiovanni and comedian Sean Cullen. Unfortunately, Sean and Deborah just can't hold a candle to Brett and Charles on the US version. Deborah's okay, but Sean can often be annoying. Albeit he wasn't as annoying as Judy Tenuta was on the 98 version, but not much better. The format works exactly like At Home Crocus. The first 2 rounds, matches are worth 50 points apiece, and then the game goes into the matchup round. Whoever has the highest score at the end of this round goes on to play the bonus game. And again, the bonus game is exactly like what they did in At Home Crocus, right down to the money. With 2,000, 1,500, or 1,000 for the answers in the audience match, and then a spin on the star wheel. So again, realistically, you're looking at about $4,500 as a top possible win. In the end, those who lose the bonus round don't go away with much. You'll be lucky if you get about $300 or $400. In the 2nd season, the budget got a slight increase, so each match in the front game was worth 100 points, and the bonus game amounts were bumped up a little bit to 2,500, 2,000, and 1,500 respectively, with 1,000 being offered for a strikeout. So now you're looking at maybe $6,000. Slight improvement, but still a tad low. And ultimately, this version of Match Game just suffers the same problem that many of the revivals had. The spontaneity just isn't there. The raunchy humor when they're going for it feels forced. And especially in this day and age, we saw this on the US version sometimes as well with Alec Baldwin. One writer put it best. Eventually, John always puts butter on his blank, doesn't get a laugh anymore. And it becomes harder and harder to make risque humor as the years go on, without making it sound forced. Now, neither Match Game or At Home Crocus were horrible remakes. They stayed faithful to the original Match Game's format, but neither version is great either. The English version did well enough to get a 2nd season, but beyond that, it didn't really make much of an impact and was largely forgotten. At Home Crocus got a good 6-year run somehow, but again, it wasn't the original. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Game So Canada. On behalf of all of us, I'm Marc Power, saying along with your big jib draw.